Hi, and welcome to the Filmmakers Compass podcast. I'm Dustin, joined by Christian, and we have a fantastic guest for this episode of the show. So, Christian, I'm going to throw it over to you real quick.
I'm really excited about this. So, on this week, we actually have a really good friend of mine, Nick Gilbert, who has unbelievable amount of experience working in the industry, and he's kind of done, well, a lot. Let's just leave it at that. He's done a lot. He's worked in the film industry in multiple places, and so Nick, I'm just really glad you could come on.
It's great to be here.
Film in general. Nick and I met a couple years ago, working on a project which evolved into a film, which evolved into a pilot.
No, that's the short film I'm thinking of, right?
Yeah. Since that time, we've worked on a couple other projects together, but I think the basis of our connection really is the fact that we are both, well, all three of us are Midwesterners here.
Yeah. From Indiana.
I'm from Indiana, and you're from that shitty state of Michigan.
Low blow right off the bat. Dang.
No, I got no problems with Michigan. You guys have a better film industry than we.
Well, if Michigan's the hand, Indiana is the armpit.
Oh, wow.
This is going to go on all episode, I think.
Okay. All right. I'll just drop it now before we start talking football. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what was the film scene like in Michigan? How did you kind of get into it? I guess the bigger question would be, how did that prep you for film industry here in LA?
Yeah, good question. The industry in Michigan has changed over the years. If we set the dial on the time machine to way, way, way back, Michigan was actually the third largest production community in the United States behind Los Angeles and New York.
Yeah. But
this is on the way, way back machine. And it was all from the auto industry. So industrials and ad-based stuff. Over the last few decades, that's not been the case. But we have had some peaks and valleys of production in Michigan. Because of the auto industry, there's always been work there. You know, be it ad stuff, which is what I did a lot early on in my career. But because of that, there's also been sort of this residual film community of people that live there, have access to the gear, both grip and electric and camera and the crews, that there's always been kind of an independent community of people doing things there. And it's also a small community. Very hard to break into, but once you're in, you're in. Yeah. Right? And so that was a really good thing where people would help each other out a lot. And then there's also always been the music aspects to Detroit. In my career, certainly I went through a phase where I did all kinds of music videos and music-based documentaries, a lot of it based on the Motown stuff. But then, of course, too, in the early 2000s and late 90s, it was a lot of Eminem-based stuff, you know, a lot of rap videos and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got into it. And I've worked in a number of different capacities in the industry over the years, starting off as a production assistant and then basically doing whatever I could to meet people and start working in different capacities, always knowing that I wanted to be a writer-director. Out of high school, I went to broadcasting school, a year-long program, and I got an associate's degree after that. Actually, in high school, I decided that, like, you know what? It's time to go out there. I had this thing about theoretical versus practical application in my life. And I was like, you know, it's time to go out there and do something. And then I chickened out and I was like, oh no, okay, I actually have to have some education. So that's when I decided to go to broadcasting school. I think I never would have got my first job in the industry had I not graduated. I was also working at a nightclub that did lots of, well, it was a disco, but it also did some rock and roll shows too. And I was heavily involved in like promoting the bands and hanging the lights and a lot of the technical.
Okay, so you got some of that G&E background.
Yeah.
You weren't even working in film technically.
That's right. Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, and that it really helped me kind of learn how to wrap cable and focus lights and learn about the different parts of lights. And even though it was applied to stages, you know, with a live rock and roll or a DJ, it still was somewhat applicable to the stuff that I would do later on, lighting human beings. Actors.
No, for sure. That's cool.
And I never would have got that first job in the business. The guy that owned the nightclub I was working at also owned a small production company called BCI, and they did, I hope he's not listening to this, but horrible corporate productions where we would shoot, you know, medical machines and things like this, and it was not super creative work, but I knew that he owned it, and that was the only connection to the film business that I had at all, was knowing some guy that owned this kind of, I don't want to call it low end, but like lower budget style video production.
It doesn't sound like you get a lot of creativity.
No, it wasn't, they did not do creative work. It was low budget, and it was training videos and corporate things and stuff like that. And I worked there after graduating. I tried for a year to get him to hire me, and he would not hire me until I had graduated from the school I was going to. So I graduated, he hired me on as a production assistant. I was making like $50 a day. This was also a long time ago. And I was still working at the disco because it wasn't a full-time thing. After working there for about 3 months, he decided to close the business. And so when I was,
Wow.
I was like,
of course,
okay.
right?
But at
Yeah,
least you
yeah.
got your experience.
I
and
got my experience. And
don't
it was a
incorporate it.
blessing in disguise, because that's also what allowed me to start working more or on hiring things in the business. Not only was I out of job at that point, but everybody else that I worked with were out of jobs as well. And they went back to freelancing. One of them got a job on a film called Polish Wedding. Lena Olin, Gabriel Byrne. Who else is in that? She's the most famous actress on it. She is the star of
Should I Google it?
Showtime film or TV show. It's a political thriller.
All right,
on
now
Showtime.
it's a trivia quiz. Hang on, here we go.
I'm not
Wedding.
gonna lie, I've never even heard of the movie, so
Yeah, well, whatever. I mean, it was a real Hollywood production.
Claire Danes?
Claire Danes.
Claire
Yeah.
Danes. Okay,
Claire
okay.
Danes.
All right,
Yeah.
there we go.
Yeah. It's early in the morning, everybody. It's like 5:30 here in Los Angeles. Really the first thing that I ever did as a production assistant.
How do you make the jump from PA to actually someone who's actually making real money and actually getting to do something? Or is it just sort of a stick around, put in the time, and look for
Yeah,
the
I mean,
opportunity?
there's no easy answer on how to do it, or else everybody would be doing it. I mean, you really have to forge your own path and make it happen for
And
yourself.
I think that's part of the challenge.
That's part of the challenge, right?
There's no road
no
to
one's
show
going to
lines.
do it for you. You have to do it yourself. You have to make your own path. But you're absolutely right in that it takes time, it takes busting your ass, and a lot of it's luck too. I mean, it is part of creating a situation where you're in the right place at the right time and ready to take the opportunities when they present themselves. Right. So I started PAing after that. I talked to everybody that was from Michigan that I knew. So there were a lot of people that came in from out of town on that job.
Yeah.
And I wasn't at a point in my career to take advantage of any of those things because I wasn't willing to move to LA at that time.
Yeah.
And that's something that we could talk about too, is like, when do you move to LA? And
Did you always want to come to LA?
Well,
or
for
was
me,
that like an opportunity presented itself? And
it was never a question of will I live in LA? It's always a question of when.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you did always want to go.
I'm not. Well, you keep saying want. I'm not saying want.
Okay.
It's more
Different
of
things.
it's more of a necessity.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
for a long time, I wanted to be. I don't know, the John Waters of Michigan. Right. You know, like a lot of people,
Yeah.
you're resistant to it, but you're just making it harder for yourself unless you get really lucky, because all the deals are made here.
Yeah.
You know, and I guess overall, one of the things to talk about is, do you want to be a filmmaker or do you want to work in film production?
I think
And
that's a
they're
very
they're
good
two different
point.
things. Although you can do both, and you can do one and then do the other, but you really need to find out what you honestly want to do. And remember, this is a long time ago. The bar to entry now is much, much less than it's ever been any time ever. You could shoot on like Beta SP, right? And then be maybe competitive in film festivals. But if you couldn't afford film, and you couldn't afford, you know, the raw stock, and you couldn't afford the processing, and you couldn't afford the actual physical cameras, it was a lot harder to do on your own.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to get access to that stuff back in the old days was working on stuff and working with people, being able to beg, borrow, and steal then, right? But they're not going to give it to just anybody. And if you go out and you work on people's spec stuff and you bust their ass and they own some of that, or they have a connection at the lab or whatever, you know, they would help you out.
So it comes back to networking.
It comes back to networking, yeah. And now, I mean, you could go shoot something on your iPhone and you could probably jump all those steps to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Right. But that's probably not going to get you a job working as a filmmaker.
Right.
But you know, the only way to be a filmmaker is to make a film, right? It's the old catch-22.
Yeah. And that's always, I think, everyone's biggest problem, right?
So did you just load up a car and come out to LA, or did you have something lined up when you made the jump?
Well, we're skipping a
Yeah,
decade.
I don't even think we should go there.
Okay.
One of the things I want to talk to you about, and obviously, how do you join a union? I think that's something that a lot of people want to know.
Right.
How do you find the right union? What advice do you have? Because I assume there's a lot of filmmakers out there who are kind of, I like this, but I like this, but I like this. And one of the things that you've done is, as you said, you did the G&E stuff before you even started, right?
Yeah.
You worked as a PA. I know you worked art department. I know you worked camera department. You've seen production
Yeah.
from across the board, which I think has to make you, whatever you're doing, more valuable, because
I think so, and I've seen at least two different types of directors out there. They're the people who have come up through the legs in working in film production, and then there's the people who, for however, made a film and did it on their own. To me, I think that the people who came up working in different crew positions have a little bit better advantage because they really understand what they're asking everybody else to do.
yeah,
Now, if you're working on a very high end, there's lots of people that never worked here that are doing great things. I mean, Spielberg was never a crew person. There's all kinds of people who are making great films films who never did it, but also they figured out a way to have all the resources that they need to do whatever they want. That doesn't happen very often. So I'm not talking about these people who were prepared for the luck when it struck. I'm talking about the majority of people who end up working as filmmakers. If you can understand what you're asking people to do from both a practical and a theoretical standpoint, you're going to be much better off. Volunteer and work on as many things as you can, work in as many different positions as you can, which is one of the things that I did. I've also never been willing to be a starving artist. So I've always had a job, and it's always been in the film business, but I've done some things that aren't my dream. I never wanted to be really a gaffer, and I never wanted to be an electrician. I never really wanted to be a grip, but those were things that I could transition into after being a production assistant. Yeah. And so there's, depending on what market there is, and even in LA, there's lots of union work, but there's lots of non-union work as well. And you can certainly make a good, decent living as a non-union crew member. Yeah, there's no question about that. And if you invest your money right, and you do health insurance right, and you save money right, there's certain advantages to doing it that way as well. That said, all the biggest jobs are union jobs. Yeah. So if you want to work at a certain level, getting into the union is probably something that you're going to have to do, whether you want to or not. Yeah. So getting into the union depends on what union you're getting into and what jurisdiction you're working in. IATSE obviously is the biggest union, and that covers just about everything aside from producers, which is something we could talk about, DGA, Camera Guild, and SAG, and actors. Basically everything else is covered under IATSE. The way IATSE breaks it up is with different locals. In Michigan and in some smaller markets, there's usually one union that will cover a number of the different crafts. Gotcha. In big markets like New York and Los Angeles, each of the crafts have their own different union. And so getting into a union in a smaller market is a good thing to do, because you could work as a grip and as an electrician, or you could theoretically, if you get people that are going to hire you and you can prove your skills and your worth, you could work in the sound department for a couple of days, and then you go and work in the electric department for a couple of days in the same week. But then when you expand out to bigger markets, when you do make that move to come to LA, you're not going to do that. You're going to have to figure out which specific union you want to do. And because you're in, say, Local 38 in Michigan, doesn't mean that you're going to get into 728 in LA, but it's certainly going to help you a lot. If you can say, look, I've been working for 5 years with Local 38. I just moved out here. Here's my resume. But that said, that's not how I did it. So I am in Local 38 in Michigan as well, but I also joined the Camera Guild there. Camera Guild, just like DGA and SAG, is a national local. So I didn't have to do much in order to be able to work in Los Angeles as well as in Michigan. Gotcha. There are some things you have to do. You have to declare what your production city is. It's either Los Angeles or New York. You have to change your residency if you live there for X amount of time. And it all has to do with being able to work as a local in other jurisdictions. But regardless, they can always put you up as a distant hire if the production company is willing to pay for it. Unless you're kind of a superstar, they're not going to.
So don't get your hopes up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. But it does happen. I mean, DPs travel all over the country and work as distant hires, and production just pays for it to house them and everything. But most people, when they're starting out, they want to go to production cities, Los Angeles, and there's lots of work in Atlanta. You don't want to change to the eastern region, although you can every, I think it's 2 years or something. You don't want to keep changing it back and forth when you're jumping back to city, because you have to wait. So, and the production isn't going to hire you. So as a distant hire, so you want to try to say, like, wait a minute, I can crash with my friends in Atlanta, hire me as a local. Right. But they're probably not going to, do that, because it's sort of breaking the union rules by not changing your jurisdiction. So don't do it.
So in other words, while you could, you shouldn't. All right, good advice.
Or they're probably going to catch you. I mean, they're going to know. But and so how you get into the union is different depending on what union you're in and what jurisdiction you're working in. So I got into Local 38 originally because they actually did an open hiring. The union at some point, and they do this every few years, realized that there's an awful lot of non-union production going on. There was some non-union people, including myself. So I was working primarily at this time as a. So in Detroit, there wasn't a separation between grips and electricians. Okay. You would do it both, and it would be smaller jobs, so it would be a grip and electric truck. Whereas in LA, it's two different trucks. It's two different unions.
Yeah.
Grip and electric are completely separate. But so in Michigan, I was working as a grip electrician on these low budget, non-union things. And then I was still doing some PA stuff on bigger union commercials.
Sure.
And they needed extra help in the art department because at that time, there weren't actually enough union people in the art department to crew it all up. And I didn't have any health insurance or anything at this time. And it was an opportunity for me to work on bigger stuff. It was an opportunity for me to meet people that were working in the union
on bigger
stuff. And I knew that if I was getting this job, there was a path to getting into the union. And so I started doing, and I was good at it. You know, I mean, I do have an art background and I just, in a very good design sense. After a couple of years of sort of doing the swing kind of stuff, the union actually had an open initiative to bring more people into the union.
Is this something that's commonly done, and is it kind of like
it happens?
We need more people? Because this isn't something I've ever heard of.
Yeah, it's happened. This is not the first time that it's ever happened, and it's happened in other localities as well.
Is it more of a small market?
It's probably more of a small market thing. I can't see that, and I don't know of it ever happening in
because I've never heard of it
or in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a smaller market.
So in some ways, that's an advantage to staying and working in your local film.
Yeah, I mean, there's different. I don't want to say that there's more opportunities in smaller markets, but there's different opportunities, and it might be easier to get into the union in smaller markets than it is in LA. I don't really know.
No, that's understandable.
But it's possible. And then a lot of unions as well have apprenticeships that you can get into and go through their apprenticeship programs. And then the classic way, of course, is to be working on a show that the union flipped. Also, you don't have to be in a union to work on union jobs. A lot of states are right-to-work states where they can't stop you from working on a job if you're not in the union.
Yeah.
And then other times they just need people. So I was actually doing some work with a school recently. The job that we were given is to go to New Mexico, which is kind of an emerging market. And the way that they work there is they have what's called an overflow list. So it's a bunch of people who aren't in the union but would like to be in the union. And then once all the union people are called for a job, then they move on to the people on the overflow list.
Okay, that makes sense.
And so what we were hired to do was to create some training for these people, actually learn how to work in these specialized fields so that when they do get the call, they're ready.
Apparently, there's no right way to join the union.
Right.
I guess there's no wrong way by that same... another thing I wanted to pick your brain on is obviously you do have your MFA.
Yeah.
Just real quick, what was the decision to go get an MFA? What was the experience like, and how do you think that has helped you in your career?
So right out of high school, I did a year program and got an associate's degree, and then started working in the business. I love education. I really believe in it, but I also believe in working. And so after a few years, I wasn't really in a position to stop and throw everything out, which is also one of the reasons why I didn't move to LA at that time, because I put in my year or so as a production assistant, and I knew that at that point, if I moved to LA, I would be starting over again. And in retrospect, I'm not sure that was the right decision.
Really?
Part of me is like, maybe I should have moved to LA earlier. Okay. But we can talk about that as we go through.
Okay.
But I knew that I wanted to learn more. I heard that I could transfer all of my credits from the Specs Howard School of Broadcast Arts, which is the broadcasting school that I went to. And I say it like that because it was half for radio and then half for television production, right? Okay. And so for half the program, the radio people that were going to become radio DJs were together with us. and I can't call it film school. I call it broadcasting school because it was really geared towards learning how to work at a television station and learning how to do like local news and things like that.
Okay.
But it was worth it because it got me that first job, right?
Yeah.
And I did learn a few things here and there. But I also learned that I could transfer those credits to a specific program and get my bachelor's degree. And then the rest of it, I could do a prior learning experience petition, and that cut out a lot of it. And the rest of it I could do online. So my bachelor's, I didn't do any classroom work for my bachelor's degree. Yeah. But I also had, when I was in high school, I took some college classes. I went to a pretty progressive one, and I was also able to transfer some college credit and things like that. It was good, but I never stopped working when I got my bachelor's. And the same thing happened with my master's. I decided to go back to get my master's after I shot my first independent film as a producer and as a director of photography. Okay. And I don't want to say that I didn't get along with the director. I did, and we still do things to do projects together now. Yeah. But I really realized that, and I always knew that I wanted to write and direct. But it was after this experience that I was like, okay, it's time to kick it into high gear. The director of photography is always in service, both, of course, to the story, but also to the director. Right? Yeah. The director is the ultimate creative decision maker on a feature film. And that's what I wanted to do, and I wasn't satisfied. And I knew after having shot my first film that I wasn't going to be satisfied
until
I was in that position.
Yeah.
So I decided, and again, I wasn't willing to stop working. So I had taken a number of Maine Media workshops in Rockport, Maine, and had really wonderful experiences.
And that's where you got your MFA?
And that's also where I ended up getting my MFA, yeah.
Okay.
So they have a program that was just starting out, and they have two parts to it. There's Maine Media workshops and then Maine Media College. And the Maine Media College has a low residency MFA program. I knew from taking workshops there, I knew the environment, and I knew some of the people that were starting and running the program. And it was a big risk, but I'm glad I did it, and I couldn't say enough nice things about the program.
How long did it take?
Well, so now you have to do it in 3 years. Oh. Then you had to do it in 5 years, and I took 6.
Because I'm just blown away by the decision to be like, okay, I'm going to go to Maine.
Yeah.
Like, that's not kind of what I think anyone really thinks.
Yeah. Well, it depends on what you want to do. So at the master's level, you're not learning about how to push a dolly. You're not learning how to focus a camera. And in fact, I went there and applied as a writer-director. What I ended up studying was just screenwriting. And I don't know how well a low residency program could work for directing or for cinematography or for anything that really requires more hands-on.
But it seems like it makes sense for
for screenwriting, it's they split the year into semesters, and you're paired with a mentor, and you work with your mentor on whatever your projects are going to be for that semester. And then you go twice a year to pitch what you've been working on, and then it's publicly critiqued by the MFA, by your mentor, by the MFA committee, and by the other students. Really great. I can definitely see how it wouldn't work for some people who need something that's more structured, right?
Yeah.
Or who are studying other aspects of filmmaking. But a low residency program in screenwriting is fantastic.
So, just about the project that you finally submitted for your MFA. Have you ever?
Well, a lot of them, but yeah.
Okay. Have you gone on to make any of these and actually shoot them as?
Oh, sure.
Projects?
Yeah. So
Nailed,
which I just finished up this year, was actually written as part of the MFA program.
No way.
I rewrote it several times afterwards. The shooting gallery was written as that was directly inspired by events in there. I don't want to give away too much of the plot, and it's loosely based on it. But it was. I heard a story about a workshop teacher who would have a photography class and would bring students out to the woods, and everyone would get naked and take pictures of each other, and it was supposedly this big cathartic experience. And it's interesting because all the students absolutely love it, and I was going, "Whoa, this is real. This is some times up on this."
Yeah. That's a little.
This is really pushing the line here. So.
I think you should have told Brie Larson. I think she's really up in ours, because that's pretty messed up, dude.
Yeah. But any of the students that I met seemed to be okay with it. So
interesting. And by the way, the Shooting Gallery is another project Nick and I worked on, and it's fantastic.
Yeah, great. Thanks.
And so we'll have to make sure you drop a.
Yeah, is there a place to check that
drop
out?
a link to it.
Yeah, you can go to my website, distortionfield.tv, and it's up there.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes, check it out. It's a good film. Yeah, we'll be sure to share a link with you guys as well. I mean, honestly, I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm just thinking about a bunch of naked people running out of the woods taking pictures. And that's kind of really weirds me out for school because, anyway, beyond that.
Well, I have to say, too, this is not part of the academic thing. It's a workshop.
Okay. There's a distinction.
Yeah.
You're eventually like, okay, I've worked on a ton of Kid Rock videos and Eminem videos and shot everything I possibly could for Chevy.
Yeah.
And every independent film coming through Michigan or feature project, I'm on it. I gotta move.
Well, there's keep in mind that for me it was always never a question of if but when.
Yeah.
And there's never the perfect time to do it. So you just gotta, get your ducks in a row and figure out for you when the best time to do it is. For me, one of the biggest, aside from some personal things that were going on in my life, one of the biggest decisions was that in Michigan for about 6 years, we had the best film incentives in the country.
Yeah.
And so we went from doing, the stuff that we've been talking about, and occasionally a big movie would come in. I worked on 8 Mile, I worked on Out of Sight, and some other big stuff that would come in here and there. Yeah. But we went from, as soon as the incentives came in, it was one big movie after one big movie after one big movie after one big movie for 6 years.
Jeez.
And then abruptly, there was a change in government. The first thing they did was repeal the incentives, right? And so, say what you want about tax incentives. I mean, I look at it both ways. As an individual who is personally affected by it in a very positive way and then in a very negative way, it's hard. Yeah. And I also believe that, even if you don't believe in the incentives, once you get them there, you have to let them exist long enough in order for the industry to grow to a point where it's sustainable.
That makes sense, yeah.
Right. To let it just go for 6 years and then abruptly pull the plug, it's just it's a stupid idea, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
at that point, then you're just throwing away all that money for 6 years.
Yeah.
Because it's not long enough for the industry to get a foothold in order to be sustainable without the incentives.
Yeah.
Right. What you need to do is let it go a little bit longer and then slowly start repealing
Like
them
phase it
once,
out.
Phase it out. Yeah. Once it's sustainable on its own. But anyway, aside from that, that was one of the big influencing factors in the timing when I decided to move to LA, because I didn't really want to go back to working on, well, I didn't really want to be working as a crew person at that point in my life anymore at all. I mean, I'm still working as a crew person, but of course I don't want to be, I want to get to the point where I'm just working on my own.
No,
projects,
but I
right?
think probably the idea of really stepping down the quality and the ambition of the projects that you were involved with probably was like, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a time to do it, it's now.
It is now. And then the other part of it is that there were so many people from Los Angeles coming in to work on jobs, and I tried to keep those connections up as long as I could, but I knew that they weren't going to last forever. Oh, who's this guy calling me that I worked on a job in Michigan 10 years ago?
Yeah.
Right. So it was also figuring out what the best point to jump on the connections that I had.
Yeah.
Right.
And is this, I mean, just for a time reference, like this is before like social media and like...
No, I mean, there was Facebook, but there wasn't.
Okay.
There was Facebook, but not Instagram. So whatever year that is.
Gotcha.
Right?
That was still the dark ages, Nick.
Yeah, I know.
Because I know that helps a little bit, like,
Like some people were tweeting, but nobody was like Snapchatting because that didn't exist.
Okay. Just
Yeah.
curious.
Yeah. So it's it's like
No,
in that situation it's not going to be applicable.
I think
So
that's a
figure
valid
out
question too, though. I think a lot of people assume that just because you have a contact in the industry, that's kind of indefinite. But there's definitely, I mean, regardless of the accessibility, right? There's definitely those windows sunset.
They do.
People change their job,
Absolutely.
they move their city, they say, screw it, I'm going to become a mechanic or whatever.
Yeah. Well, it's like one thing that happens in the business is that you work up a team with the people that you work with. And if your team is working really well, you want to keep working with the same people as long as they're the best people for that specific job over and over again, because you develop a shorthand and you develop a level of trust.
Yeah.
And it's hard to start working with different people from both sides, right? Because you have to build that up, and you have to build up that trust, and you have to build up that that way of working, right? Because every crew works in a little bit different way. Every job is a little bit different, and whatever you can do as a shorthand is good, right? So people really don't want to hire people that they don't know. But when they go to a smaller market, say you're in LA and you go to Michigan to do a movie, there's usually parts of the incentives or whatever is bringing you there, or maybe it's just simply financial that they are not bringing every single crew person to a smaller market.
Yeah.
They end up having to hire some local people. So it's a great way to get to know people from LA and from bigger markets and show them that you can do it because you guys are doing it together, right?
Yeah.
But they're not going to remember you. They might remember you 10 years later, but they're not going to remember how well you worked, or they're going to go, wait a minute, why am I going to hire this guy?
So you really got to jump on that.
You got to jump on them, yeah. I mean, there's a certain amount of time that you have. Another thing that really helped me is I was working on Oz the Great and Powerful, which was a huge, almost it was I think like 8-month shoot.
Yeah.
And then we had almost 6 or 8 weeks, I don't really remember, of reshoots back in Los Angeles.
Dang.
And so I was asked to come out and work on the reshoots. And it was great because then I'm in LA and I'm showing people that, hey, look, I'm here. It's not I'm going to move to LA.
No, you're
but
here.
it's here.
You're committed.
I'm here. I'm
you're doing it at the same level as before. Yeah.
So here I am. What's next, guys?
Yeah.
That kind of a thing. And also, even though the Camera Guild is a national local, in LA there are specific things that you have to do in order to be able to work here. There's an industry experience roster, which you have to get on. There's safety pass classes that you have to do. And so even though you're in the Camera Guild, there still are some barriers to entry to working in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But if you've just been working on a whole bunch of really big movies in Michigan, you qualify for the hours and everything in order to get on the industry experience roster, and then you can take the safty pass classes and that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So you said you came out here for reshoots, and then you went back?
Well, I knew that I was, so I did go back, and I went back and worked on a pilot. No, that's not exactly how it worked. So I knew that I was moving here. So I came out and I stayed, but then I had a family at that point, and I went back and then moved them out here. So I actually drove across the country twice in like a 2-month period.
Jeez. Dang, yeah.
Well, that was a lot of fun.
What a journey.
Then I ended up I thought that when I first moved that I'd be going back and forth doing jobs in Michigan and jobs here.
Okay.
But actually I ended up going back and doing one pilot and then never doing another job in Michigan. which was, I mean, I'm very grateful for that, but I don't suspect that it's going to happen like that for a lot of people. I think, when you're starting out, you're probably going to go
You got to take what you
back
can
and
get
forth.
where you can get it. Crazy.
And then since you've been in LA, what was the path like here? When you were first starting out, obviously you had your footprint in the guild.
Yeah.
Were you able to find work right away?
So I let everybody know that I was here, that I was willing to take whatever jobs in the camera department I could get. So really, I should also say too that when I really decided to start concentrating on being a writer-director, I decided to stop shooting things as well. One, because I just wanted to concentrate on what I really wanted to do. And two, because being a DP takes an awful lot of work beyond time spent on set.
Yeah.
Right? So you're always working on your reel, you're always working on making connections and getting out there. And I realized pretty early on that is time that I need to be spending writing and working on my own projects.
Okay.
But once again, I've never been willing to be a starving artist, and I've never, after a certain point of working as an adult, you can't just stop working and not pay your mortgage.
Yeah.
So I decided to basically become a DIT at that point. I've always been very technically inclined. As the new position was coming out, as we transitioned from film to digital, it was something that I just kind of gravitated towards, and something that I could make a decent living at, and basically kind of show up and do my job and go home and write and work on my own stuff.
So for everyone who has no idea what a DIT is.
Well, you should know what a DIT is before you decide to move to LA, first of all.
Valid
if
point.
you don't know what a DIT is, don't move to LA yet. DIT stands for Digital Imaging Technician, and the term is a little bit antiquated because it kind of comes from the analog world, back when there were videotape operators and camera shaders and things like this. But it's sort of been the term and the position that's transferred into the digital age. And basically the DIT is responsible for a number of things depending on the size of the job. It could be split between a DIT and a digital loader, or it could be one person that does all of it. But in a nutshell, you're really responsible for helping the DP maintain the exposure, with waveforms, vector scopes for color, having calibrated monitors on set so that everybody knows what you're actually looking at in a proper way. We're usually shooting at this point logarithmic color profiles, so if you're natively looking at that, it all looks washed out, but nobody wants to look at a washed out image, especially producers and people that don't technically understand what the image is. So a lot of what the DIT does is called live grading. And so we'll take that logarithmic color profile and turn it into a Rec 709 or a Rec 2020 color space. So we're adding a little bit of contrast to it, and we're adding a little bit of saturation and maybe doing some live color adjustments.
So when all the non-technical people walk on set,
it looks good.
It doesn't look like crap.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Boom.
But the DIT is on some jobs also responsible for creating lookup tables, which is basically that color information that then gets shot to post.
So then the editor is on
board, right? And you're making dailies and the color matches on that. Also downloading and QCing the files if you don't have a loader to do that. Well, so I guess we're talking about how easy is it to get work when you come to, I was willing to take jobs as a loader. We're not just coming back, which is, really a step back in my career. And it's hard sometimes when you're working in a position that's way below your capacity and ability. Yeah. You just kind of got to suck it because, you're working
You're like,
for them.
I'm a lot more experienced than you.
I'm a lot more experienced, and frankly, I'm better than you. Looking at what you're doing.
That's got to be hard, but you made the decision. You're like, okay, I got to pay the bills.
Right, got to pay the bills. And it's
I need the time to develop.
That's right, yeah. And so take the pain now for the payoff later. Yeah. And so that's one of the things. That's how I did it. But you guys are going to have to figure out also, like, how are you going to do it? What sacrifices are you willing to make in order to make it out here, knowing that you're looking at the bigger picture and it may hurt now, but in the long run it'll pay off.
And I think this is a good time to go back to the point that you brought up. Do you want to work on films, or do you want to work?
Or do you want to be a filmmaker?
Right. Films? Yeah. There's a difference, but I assume what you're saying is, if you want to be a filmmaker, there is advantage to being here, right?
Yeah.
Because kind of the production apparatus
is here. Well, I look at it this way. All the deals are still made here. Yeah. Right? So it doesn't matter how many people are going to New Orleans or how many people are going to Atlanta or how many people are going to Vancouver to work on jobs. All the decisions are still being made here. So if you're pitching stuff, you're not doing it in Atlanta. You're not doing it in New Orleans. You're pitching in LA and maybe in New York a little bit. Right? Now, you can pitch stuff on Skype. But if you get, even do beyond that initial Skype and you even just get a general meeting, you got to come out here for the general meeting. And they're not going to fly you out for a general meeting. No. Right? So it's all on your buck. The advantages are tenfold, to being here if you're at a point where you're actively pitching and trying to make deals and trying to get things developed. If you just want to work as a crew person, I don't know anymore that being in LA matters that.
Yeah.
There's regional
It
production.
seems like there's better work and
there might
cost
be
of
more,
living's less expensive.
Yes, definitely costs less to live in Atlanta. There might be more work in features there, probably not in television, but maybe in features. But if you really want to make stuff, to a certain point, you got to be here. Even if you make your first feature in Michigan or someplace, does really great on the festivals, you still got to get to LA to pitch your next project.
Makes sense. Know exactly what you want to do, and then you can decide when to make that jump and if it's appropriate. Is that what I'm getting from you?
Yeah, I'd say that. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
This may be a little sidestep here, but I would be interested in hearing your thoughts on taking a film through a festival run. The benefits of that.
Well, and is there still a benefit to that? I think that's the more
I go back and
question.
forth with it. And for a while I was teaching more than I am. I still teach workshops a little bit, but that's a question that would come up with my students all the time. They were essentially 3 levels of distribution, or types of distribution, right? You've got theatrical, you've got cable broadcast, and then you've got festivals, right? And festivals were a really legitimate way to get your stuff to an audience. Now, of course, we have the internet, and that's all thrown out, right? So we've talked about Nailed a little bit, and I did come up with a festival strategy specifically for that film, but I don't know that is the same strategy that I would work for other films. Nailed is meant to be a festival film. Okay. It's short, it's upbeat, it's very programmable festival circuit with this one. Shooting Gallery, which is a longer film, it's like 15 minutes and some frames, is a much more difficult film to program in festivals. Yeah. And so I sent it out, because if you guys don't know, festivals would much rather program
the 3-minute film.
3-minute or 5-minute films where you can program a bunch of them than one longer in the same time block. If you don't have stars, I see a film festival has a star in it. Well, from a programming standpoint, that makes sense because the audience, to a certain extent, is going to come to see the stars just like they would anywhere else. So, think about your strategies when you're getting into this. We sent Shooting Gallery to a number of festivals. It didn't really have very much success on the festival circuit, and then so I just put it out there online. And I think that's completely a valid thing to do. Figure out what the best audience is for your film, and hey, if you want to put it out there online, go for it.
Exciting.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot to be said for festivals aside from prestige of getting some palm fronds on your poster. Good festivals have 2 things that are really good about them. One is the opportunity to network, and the other is like the workshop. So if you're thinking about what festivals you want to get into, definitely look for ones that are more than just a festival where they screen their films, but they're also kind of a market. People can come and actually buy your film, and they're in a position to do that. Yeah. Or you're going to get something out of being a filmmaker who has a film in the festival, like with the workshops that they have that you get into for free because you're in the festival, or the networking parties where you can meet people who are actually in distribution, or in development that might actually help you.
That's good, and I think
that's really good. Yeah.
And that's the stuff I don't think a lot of people think of.
Whichever one
close to my house, or
that's right.
$5 or
Yeah, so really think about it. I mean, what is the festival actually offering you? Filmmaker Magazine every year does an article called 50 Film Festivals Worth the Submission Fee, which is worth looking at, and they update it every year.
Good tip. Awesome. And nice plug, by the way. Thank you, Filmmaker Magazine.
Oh, and Film Freeway, let's plug those guys too. They always do a list every year of Oscar qualifying festivals. So
and that's great to know too, because if you're going to take a chance and reach for something that actually could have implications.
Yeah, so choose your festivals wisely, and it gets really expensive really fast.
And plan on that beforehand, which I don't think people do.
Yeah, budget for it. If your film is advocating for something, try to find people who are like-minded that are also advocating for that, and they may be interested in giving you money. I do think we're in an exciting point because, and this isn't applicable to shorts really because there isn't that much of a market, but equity crowdfunding is a real thing. I think that regular crowdfunding is it's like something that you can do once every 10 years. For me, I've crowdfunded one thing, and 90% of the people that gave me money were my friends. Yeah, right.
You can only bug your friends so often.
Right? and I think that from the other people that I've talked to that have crowdfunded things, they're in the same boat, right? But equity crowdfunding, if you're actually making a feature film and you can, sell some foreign territories, pre-sell some foreign territories, and you're willing to take on, debt equity partners, equity crowdsourcing is really an exciting new way to
no, it's actually very cool.
Yeah, that's like...
Right, and this is one of the things, like, with that feature that I shot, I was also a producer on it. When we were going for money at the end of it, and we made that film, 15 years ago for about $200,000. Looking back at it, after it was all said and done, we kind of realized that it would have been easier to raise more money than the amount that we did, because a lot of people at that budgetary level, they just don't care. People that can afford to lose that money also want to take bigger risks so that the payoff is bigger.
you know,
That's
you hear the
interesting.
idea sometimes, right? That if you're going to go and try and raise money to make a short film, right? Just go all the way and try and raise the money to make a feature, because it's the same thing, right? It's harder sometimes to raise a little bit of money
Agreed.
than a whole lot of money. So I think that's a good point that a lot of people don't consider, because it seems overwhelming. I mean, for regular people, the concept of $200,000 is a lot of money.
Right, but not for an investor, right? And
not for anyone in film.
Or not for anybody in film, not in equity, anybody that works in, for a fund.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it.
Absolutely.
To take the risk, because it's a high risk, but for such a little payoff, it's not worth taking the risk. So if you're asking for more money, it's a little bit easier. And also, raising money for short films is really hard if you're thinking about raising debt, because there's no market for them. I mean, there's a little bit of market. So in Europe, there's channels that will play shorts. There's not Short of the Week, but Shorts.tv. Short of the Week doesn't pay you, but Shorts.tv pays you. And there's a couple other, like if you qualify for the Oscars and you get in, even if you don't win, you'll probably get some level of distribution for doing things. But other than that, there just really isn't a market for shorts. So anybody that you're asking to raise debt from,
it has to be a labor of love.
Yeah, I mean, they're never going to make back their investment.
Yeah.
I don't want to say never, but it's highly, highly unlikely.
Oh, yeah. Well, it sounds like a bus is about to drive through this building right now. I mean, I guess that's just the joys of downtown LA. So
there's like someone walking in the middle of the street or something.
On that
Actually,
note,
I just have that sound on my phone.
let's talk a little bit about movies. Does that sound good to you guys?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that part.
Oh.
Wow, I think someone's now getting murdered outside.
Something thinks she got hit by the bus?
With the police like this recording, we'll make it available. You don't even need to subpoena us. It's really fine. Okay.
Now.
That was interesting. And it's very fitting, too, because the movie that actually we're going to talk about is, in fact, a movie about Los Angeles that everybody loves, called L.A. Confidential.
So I thought L.A. Confidential would be a good film to talk about when we're on the podcast about people moving to LA. And for me, like, the theme of LA Confidential is sort of the difference between what's on the surface of Los Angeles and what's the seedy underbelly. What the truth of it is.
I love it. Okay.
Now, if you remember back, like, to the way that the film opens, right? It's Danny DeVito as Sid Hutchins, I think is his character's name, and he's doing the voiceover, he's doing the monologue, the preamble, introducing everything, and it's this sort of travel narrative, right? Come to Los Angeles, the city of 1,000 orange groves and everything, right? So he's this beautiful patina, and then wham, bam, here's the underneath, here's the seedy underbelly.
Here's the gritty part of
hush, hush.
Yeah.
Then it turns into this sort of, can we call it a neo-noir, or should we just call it a film noir? I mean, it doesn't take place.
I always thought of it as a noir, but
I mean, it's not
I
made in
think
the
people
classic
consider it neo-noir because it's made
currently.
In the 90s.
Yeah.
But it's totally true in many ways. The themes are consistent with noir, like the time period.
Yeah.
I would consider it a modern day noir.
I would. Yeah, I think I would. Yeah. And so, right, when you're moving to LA, you're going to have to look at some of that stuff, right? Here's this idealized, I'm moving to Hollywood.
I'm going to live in Santa Monica.
Right? I'm going to make movies. It's going to be awesome, dude. I'm going to surf every day. And then, you get here and you're living in the valley somewhere and you're driving a VW with, spare tire on it. And
it takes you 45 minutes to get to the water.
That's right. Yeah. And that's when that's not rush hour. That's
right.
Good traffic. So, I think in one way it's evocative, if not straight out indicative of the LA noir
Very
experience.
much. I like that. I like that. That's you just that beyond just a film and apply it to everyone's life, and that disappointment that they feel when they get here and they're like,
right,
this is not what it was billed as.
Well, it's weird too. Like, I haven't seen LA Confidential. It's probably been it was on Netflix, I think, at one point, and I watched it maybe a year ago.
Go watch it tonight. Yeah,
it's a great movie, and it's interesting because LA itself sticks out as almost like a character in the film.
Absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yep. Get the DVD, and Chris Hansen, the director, has his photo pitch that he used to Arnon Michelin from Regency, who actually funded the film. And it's really great because he shows you the actual cards that he used in the pitch, talks about him, and he's really pitching Los Angeles in that time period, and then the characters.
Yeah.
So he's the people that are in James Ellroy's story, but then here's how we're going to show them on screen.
I think what's great about LA Confidential is in many ways it's true to the components of original 1940s noir film that we love, right?
Yeah.
And
it has a lot of that.
It's one of the only films that I feel like in recent years to kind of hold true to the qualities of traditional noir without feeling like it's just kind of evoking the qualities of noir for nostalgic sake. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I agree with you, but there's certain points that I don't agree with you on. I mean, because it's not, for instance, lit like a film noir. Well, you know, there's never the lighting is never coming through the window and hitting the lines. You're right. There's heavy shadows. There's never any crazy like backlights.
There's no.
So in one sense, from a thematic standpoint, it is very noir. I mean, there's a femme fatale. There's detectives all over. You know, it has these tropes of the genre, but at the same time, it is a little bit updated, and it doesn't have to, you know, hit every single one of those noir points. There's no voiceover in it, for instance. It's not black and white.
Well, Danny DeVito.
Yeah.
Does he has some?
Well, it's not true voiceover. I mean, it's a monologue from the magazine.
That was always the thing that ticked me off. Like, if I had one complaint about that, well, two. One, they make City Hall be the police station.
Yeah, right.
And I was like,
there's an error there. Yep.
And two, the fact that the monologue narrator dies halfway through the film.
Well, spoiler alert. Yeah.
Listen,
anyway, spoilers.
Yeah, we can edit that out, I guess. But I mean, and the other thing too is
and there's 2 Australians that star in it.
That is true.
The movie has a surprising amount of action.
That's full of action.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
There's like some really cool action set pieces.
Yeah.
And I mean, especially the final one.
The final
quite crazy.
This is the big shootout.
But you don't
I'm just going to ruin it for everybody who's listening.
Well, and I think
the shootout at the Victory Hotel.
I think another interesting thing too is that whereas most noirs follow kind of our Marlowe, the one guy, this one actually kind of follows a couple guys.
There's 3 protagonists,
and they convene, and I think that's a really interesting story trope that you see in a lot of other noirs.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes from. I haven't read it, but apparently the novel, the James Ellroy novel that it's based on, is really, really thick and dense. It has multiple, even more protagonists, and it follows multiple characters for a long period of time. And they really took a lot of creative liberty in distilling it down to something that would work in a film in 2 hours.
That's cool. I should read it.
Yeah, it's been on my shelf for years, and the reason why I haven't read it is every time I look at it, it's a commitment. You know, I mean, when you're in, you're in.
Well, and also if you love the movie, I mean, sometimes a movie I really love, I'm always hesitant to read the book and see.
Yeah.
The other thing too with the movie that's worth noting is it's a movie about LA, but you have filmmaking. It is a movie packed with stars.
It is. Well, keep in mind, Russell Crowe and Guy Pearce were not stars when the film was made.
Not at the time.
And
Russell Crowe,
Spacey,
he was around in the 80s, wasn't he?
No, he was an Australian actor and had done some stuff in Australia, and this is one of the first films, if not the first film that he did in the United States. Should we talk about Kevin Spacey?
Well, he's part of the movie.
He's part of the movie,
yeah, sure.
and I mean,
regardless of your opinion, it's worth watching it because it's one of his better performances, I think.
Yeah. And I mean, the stigma that's attached to him almost makes him a better character. You know, we bring things to films that we watch based on what we know about the people who make them or who are in them.
Right. And then actually, it's very ironic.
It is ironic.
20 years later, finding out all this, we're like, okay.
But
the point is, everything that we've heard recently, watching it through that lens in the present enhances the character to some extent.
To some extent, right? Yeah, in a strange, sad way.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I don't think anyone planned on, but I guess that was just a consequence of the present.
And I bet the same thing would be true with a lot of his films. You know, American Beauty for sure. I think that watching that again now, I haven't seen it in a number of years, but I don't think
creepy a little bit.
It was, right? Yeah. And does what we know now, how does it affect our viewing of that film? You know, through our contemporary lens.
The director of L.A. Confidential,
Kurt Sanson, also
directed
8 Mile.
8 Mile.
Yeah.
Had you seen L.A. Confidential when you started working on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we never talked about it.
Is being a fan of someone's work. Right, and then getting the opportunity to work with the artist on another project. I love this.
It's more rewarding. This is cool, kind of a thing, and it wears off really fast. Because it happens all the time. Yeah. Now,
Well, for you, but what I'm saying is, I'm sure there's a lot of people who their bucket list is, I would love to make a movie with this person that made my favorite movie. This movie that I like, whatever. And so, I mean, I'm not much of a star fucker, and I never have. Right. And so, and it's also when you meet people in that capacity, there's always an inadequacy in the structure of power,
right? And so it never feels like when you're first meeting somebody in a work environment. Well, first of all, there's the professionalism, right?
Okay, this is the most pragmatic, common sense answer I've ever heard. You're just supposed to be like, no, dude, it's awesome. It's so much fun to finally get to see people whose art you admire. Okay, continue with your real.
You're there to do a common job,
politic advice,
right? Here. And when you're a fanboy, that changes the professional relationship.
That's fair.
Right. I mean, in some sets, or even like, don't look the actors in the eye. You know, I mean, you can get on sets depending on how the director or how the actors want to structure their experience while they're there. And they have more power than you. I mean, unless you're directing. And so, I mean, the ADs and all of production will tell you that, like, okay, this is a very serious scene. The actors don't want any eye contact made with them while they're performing the scene.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to kind of look away, even though you're there to do a job. You can't just be standing there. And so that same thing that I feel is applicable whenever you're in a professional environment with somebody, whether you admire them or not. You know, don't go up to them and you can say, hey man, nice to meet you, loved your work on this or that, but you don't really want to engage them deeply in a conversation about that, or like ask for their autograph or something like that. Because
annoying.
They get annoying, they get it all the time, and you're both there for a professional reason, right?
That's fair.
So there's a place and time for that, and it's not here.
And it's not on
It's called
set.
Comic-Con, not on
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
That's fair. That's good advice. Okay, I take back the harsh comments about the dryness of your answer.
I'm just trying to be honest for
No,
all our
I
listeners
appreciate
out
it.
Cinema Land.
Takeaways. When you meet your star, don't go up to them and harass them about the fact that you love their work. 2, watch LA Confidential, because whether you like noirs or not, it's just a great freaking movie.
Yeah, it really is. I actually, to look up the director, found it on Rotten Tomatoes, and it has like a 99%.
It's great. It deserves it.
I was like, dang, you don't see movies that high.
LA Confidential, I think, will hold up forever because it was made out of its time, right? I mean, I think the story takes place in the early 50s, like 53 or 52 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it was made in the late 90s, and so it never feels dated, right? Because it isn't of its time. It's of
Which I think why, unlike most neo-noirs, it actually was successful, and it's had a long shelf life, which kind of is, you know,
oh man, now I want to
unheard
look
of
up.
for the most part.
Yeah.
Was it the Academy Awards that year? It was nominated for Best Picture, and it was like one of the best Picture groups. I forget what it lost to though. Did it?
I don't remember.
I know it came out in the same year as Boogie Nights, but I don't think Boogie Nights won for that year either.
Should I look it up?
Yeah, look it up.
All right.
Just killing time here on the podcast.
Well, now we got to know.
But we can just edit it so it sounds like we have the answers.
Yeah. What year would you say it was?
98? 97, 98?
Yeah, 97, 98.
Let's see. Best Picture nominees: As Good as It Gets, The Full Monty, Good Will Hunting, LA Confidential, and Titanic.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
Titanic.
What a year.
So if Titanic
Nights
wasn't
must have been
there,
the next
I really
year.
think that it probably could have had that all wrapped up. Huh?
As Good as It Gets and Good Will Hunting, I don't know.
Shoot, all these movies as Oscar nominees hold up. Like, they still get watched, you know.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It was a good year for film.
Titanic, though, man. That thing won everything.
Yep.
Yeah. How could it
Well,
not?
screenplay. Good Will Hunting won screenplay that year.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, well, we want to throw it over to you real quick. If you have any final words or anything that you...
Who do you have to plug here so that, you know, you don't get, like, mained on your next set? Anyone you got to plug? Steven Spielberg, because it never hurts, you know. Steven, thanks for the great work. We love your movies.
Maybe we should just close with talking about LA Confidential again.
Okay.
So Kim Basinger plays a prostitute who comes to Los Angeles with the dreams of being an actress, and it doesn't work out for her, right?
Okay.
But Pierce Patchett, the pimp, drug dealing, freeway making millionaire, still allows her to act a little bit, and she has some level of satisfaction with that, right?
Yeah.
So if you guys are coming out to LA and you have this dream of how you think it's going to go, I can virtually guarantee it's not going to go the way you think it's going to go, but it's going to go in a different way. And be open-minded enough, maybe not as open-minded as selling out a prostitute, but open-minded enough that you're going to be open to getting the most out of your Los Angeles experience that you can.
Dude, Nick, people have questions, want to connect with you. Are you on social media at all? What are the ways they can find you? Obviously, you dropped your website before, but...
Yeah, just go to my website. You can find me that way. It's distortionfield.tv.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Really appreciate it. You had great stuff to say, and we're looking forward to more awesome awesome projects.
Sounds good.
Definitely check out Nick's website. He's done some amazing projects, and you can also find him on IMDb to see more of the extent of his actual.
That's true, yeah.
Let us know if you have any questions or thoughts, or.
All right, yeah, you can connect with me at Big Kid D-Man.
And I'm at NDCal5.
So thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Nick, again. And
My pleasure.
we'll be back for another episode.
See you next time.